Regularly scheduled programs will not be seen tonight so that we may bring you the NFL football game live and in color.
Traded from Oakland in the offseason. Oakland thought he could no longer throw the long ball. But watch him. Give him a weapon like 00 Kenny Burrow. He'll do just that. Also, Houston with its brilliant two tight end offense. And what tight ends to use? David Gasper and, of course, Mike Crawford, too. Houston at 6-3 must go against this man who leads his team at 7-2, Steve Grogan, who has matured into a fine quarterback. He's got touch now, not the old mobility, but touch. And he's got another great tight end, Russ Francis. On top of that, he's got the speed receivers like the great Stanley Morgan. So what a matchup. The Houston Oilers against the New England Pats.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Get it in here! I got one thing to say. This is when the big dogs come out. Damn right. Okay? Right. You can't roll with the big dogs. Stay on the board.
Let's knock them on their backs, butt them in the mouth, knock their ass in the dirt. That's what we got to do.
Hey, baby! We're going to be here all day, baby! I like this kind of party.
Good evening and welcome, everybody. I'm Kirk Herbstreit along with Brent Musburger.
His method is not Grand Prix, but Demolition Derby.
Welcome to basically a sports, or basically a football show. It's the morning. I'm a little rusty, folks.
Yeah, doing the midday shift today.
Midday shift. Fresh out of bed. Episode 11?
11.
Season 2, episode 11 of basically a football show. I'm Zach. Along with me is Greg. And Greg, there was football.
Yeah.
Not again. It's kind of the mid-season dregs in the NFL. There's a few interesting things to talk about.
Well, we had 6 teams on a bye week this week too, which really cut down on not only the number of games, but I think the quality of games too.
Yeah, I mean, but to be perfectly honest, I mean, outside of Green Bay and Detroit, the other 4 teams, I could take or leave whether they actually play football on Sundays or not. Some interesting results though, and then in college, of course. We had the first rankings come out last week for the committee, and we saw those. They're already going to have some changes. We had some big losses in at least the top 15.
We've seen our first elimination game of the year, which is basically what Ole Miss and Auburn was. So, still plenty to talk about.
Yep, and we will get to all that in just a second, but we will start with the National Football League. And I want to just put this little piece of news first because this came out this morning. Adrian Peterson is going to avoid jail time, if you can believe that. Because we all knew he was going to avoid jail time. Right. He's taking a plea deal to a lesser charge and will avoid the felony child abuse charge and will not get any jail time because that's how it works if you're a high-level professional athlete.
Yeah, more or less. It's going to be interesting to see how the NFL handles this now because regardless of whatever the verdict or the plea deal is, there's still the pictures. There's still the fact that we still all know what he did.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you've got a guy that's now just been convicted of a misdemeanor. So it's really going to be interesting to see how it falls out. But
I think they probably keep him suspended for the rest of the year. I don't see them bringing him back this year.
Okay.
Because it really, what would it do for the Vikings? And what would it look like if the Vikings fought like, well, no, he only got a misdemeanor now, so we really need him back on the team. They already had the issue the first time where they benched him and then they got their ass kicked and they unbenched him and then they said, oh wait, we shouldn't have done that, and then they suspended him or put him on the special list or whatever.
On the commissioner's list, yeah.
The commissioner exemption list, yeah.
If it were me, this Vikings team's a team that they're young, they're starting to come together. I would leave it alone. I would just say, you know what, even no matter what the commissioner decides on, I think that it would be time to just, for the long-term perception of the franchise, maybe just to cut him loose.
Really?
Granted, is it the smartest football move you can make, especially when you're a team that could be contending for a playoff spot? No. But you've got to, then again, this is the NFL we're talking about, where
if
5-6 weeks ago we were looking like we thought it was going to be the end of the league, and now we're not even talking about this stuff anymore. So,
if you cut Adrian Peterson, though, you realize that all 29 teams are going to line up and try to get him.
Yeah, but they're going to be the ones that look bad doing it.
I don't think it. But now that it's one of those things where he's going to get the lesser charge. He's going to go through, do whatever he needs to do, and he's going to come back and he's going to start playing football and playing well, and everyone's going to forget.
Yeah, this is true too.
So I think any negative PR will be outweighed by what he could probably bring to your football team.
I will say this from a pure football standpoint.
Yeah.
If he can come back and if the Vikings do decide to reinstate him and he comes back and plays even at 80% of Adrian Peterson level, that Vikings team's going to get real tough all of a sudden because they're playing decent football now.
Yeah, they're playing pesky.
Yeah, and they could move from pesky to not dangerous, but I don't know what the next step from pesky is. But it could be interesting. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We still got the commissioners got to weigh in on this. The league has to weigh in on it. So we do know for a fact, though, that he's going to get a misdemeanor charge, and that really the difference. There's not a lot of difference between that and say a speeding ticket. So. Mm-hmm. But there's still the pictures and there's still the perception, but it will be interesting to see how it plays out.
It'll be definitely interesting. But let's get back to the on-field things, and we'll start on Thursday, as always, where the improbable happened. The New Orleans Saints won a road game, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, they did.
14 points in the second quarter en route to a 28-10 victory over the Carolina Panthers. Cam Newton looked awful, to put it lightly. We'd all been kind of before the season. We'd said the Panthers were going to regress, but they had been playing well for the most part. But Cam Newton has still been the guy that's been the one that's off this year. Their defense has been okay. It's Cam Newton the one that's kind of not bringing it back up to the level where he was playing the last couple of years.
Do you think maybe that we kind of fell under the spell of the Panthers because they played well out of the gate? And we were like, hey, maybe they're not going to be as bad as people thought they were. But now, we're at the halfway point of the season. They're 3-5-1, and maybe it's just that they weren't really as good as we thought they were, and it's just starting to show now. Because I think if we've seen anything in the first 8-9 games of the year so far, is that every week somebody else looks like they're going to be good, and another team's going to be bad. I mean, we wrote off Miami a few weeks back, and look at them now. So I'm just wondering if with the Panthers, we just kind of. We let them trick us into thinking maybe they really were better than they actually are. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. But I think the other thing is just that that NFC South is terrible.
Oh, God, it is.
And the Saints, now that they've won a road game, they might just turn it around and go 9-7 just to get that extra win. And the Saints are starting to kind of coalesce and become a better team like we all thought they were going to be, but better in terms of that garbage pile that is that division. So the Saints now on top of that division. I see no reason for them to turn it back now either.
They're 4-4 now, and
yeah, right.
If they can pick up one more road win and do their usual undefeated at home, that's a 10-6 season. Yeah. And looking at the rest of the NFC right now, other than the Cardinals, it's kind of in flux. I don't know that 10-6 won't be good enough for a number 2 seed in the NFC. At this point in the proceedings. So it could, we wrote them off. All of a sudden, they might be right back in the picture again. It's been that kind of season this year.
Yeah, it's definitely been a little weird there, especially in that. I mean, Atlanta is technically only 2 games out of first place. But I will say this right now with unequivocally, the Atlanta Falcons are not going to make the playoffs this year. Oh, Greg, come on.
Even in that horrible division, it's just not going to happen. That is a bad football team. Just a bad football team.
Yeah. We'll move on to Sunday so we can talk about some other bad football teams. Namely, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they go into your Cleveland Browns. And it was a tight one. The Browns made it interesting, but Brian Hoyer with 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, leads the way in a 22-17 win over Tampa.
The Cleveland Browns. Yep. I really thought for a second
5-3.
They're 5-3, but I don't know if I've seen a more unimpressive 5-3 in my whole life. They struggled to beat one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they lost to the worst team in the NFL. Well, maybe the second worst team now because the Raiders still don't have a win. But
they probably won't.
But but this is the same team that you look at, and I think this is another great illustration of how this season has been. This team dominated a Pittsburgh Steelers team that is just red hot right now. So I don't know what to make of anything, but The Browns are 5-3. As a Browns fan, I can't complain about it. That's the best start they've had that I can remember in a good long while. So, but they just don't look very impressive. I don't know how this is going to turn out. It's a high wire act, even when they're playing a god awful team like the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I mean, they're a half game ahead of Baltimore. They're a half game behind Pittsburgh. And I guess they're 3/4 of a game behind Cincinnati.
Yeah, they're 0.65% behind Cincinnati, or 6.65 games behind Cincinnati, whatever that is.
Yeah,
and they have the Bengals this Thursday,
and they play the Bengals this Thursday, and that makes that game a little bit more interesting. Where is it at? Is it in?
It's in Cincinnati.
In Cincinnati,
yeah,
but it's still in Ohio. If the Browns go in there and beat the Bengals, then what? Then what do we do?
Then I think we say we've got the NFC South version of the AFC, which is the AFC North. Better records, but still, not a lot of good football teams. But it'll make it interesting. If the Browns end up 6-3, I don't know how anybody that is a Cleveland Browns fan could complain about that from this point forward. They've already won more games than they won last year. They actually do, dare I say it, look like they might be headed in the right direction. So it's all gravy from here is the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, they're like we've talked about all year. They have their games where they look great. They have their games where they're kind of like this one. And they have games where they're awful, like last week against Jacksonville. And that game against Jacksonville now looms even bigger. Imagine if they were 6-3, going into 5-3-1 Cincinnati, and they would be tied with Pittsburgh at 6-3 too. You know, this could have been a playoff season for the Browns, but I mean, it still very well could be, just because that division's so tight from top to bottom.
We have many mantras here in basically a podcast universe. One of the many of them is you have to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. The Browns didn't do that against Jacksonville, and it's costing them big right now. But another thing to think about with the Cleveland Browns, and we can move on. Yep. Josh Gordon comes back, not this week, but the following week. That could make things interesting. They could get, if he's capable of what he did last year, all of a sudden they've got a new weapon on offense, and it might change everything. And then again, it might script the whole chemistry of the team. Who knows? Yeah,
and I mean, we looked at their schedule, and they have some easy ones coming up and some lighter games. But again, they got to beat who they got to beat.
Right.
So, but of course, they still have to play my Colts in a couple weeks. So,
where is that? Do you remember?
It's in Indy.
Oh God. Okay. Well, that's not going to be pretty. Be a great looking uniform matchup, but
you never know, because I mean, the Colts did get their doors blown off by the Bumblebees last week. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on to a much more important game in terms of the NFC, the National Football Conference, as Carson Palmer and the Arizona Cardinals go into Dallas to take on the Tony Romo-less Cowboys. Brandon Weeden gets the start there for the Cowboys, and it looked early like maybe Brandon Weeden was going to do something of it, 10-0 after the first quarter, but then the Cardinals stormed back 14 points in the second quarter and another 14 points in the fourth quarter to come out with a 28-17 win in the Jerry Dome, and the best record in the National Football League is your Arizona Cardinals.
I called them at the beginning of the season. I said, I like this team a lot. And you know what's funny is that in the prediction game, we always talk about the ones like this is, look at how smart I am. I called the Cardinals. We're not going to bring up the 19 teams I missed on because that. But this is a good looking team, man. And they've got just the right mix of everything. They've got a really good defense. They play just enough offense to get the points they need. Carson Palmer is, I hate to use the term game manager, but that's kind of what he's become. He's not hurting them. They got a good running back in Andre Ellington. They've got the great Larry Fitzgerald, and they've got the best record in the NFL right now. So I think that they're legit. I mean, that's been the big question since they've made it to the pinnacle here with the best record in the NFL. Everybody's been talking on the talk shows. Are they legit? I think they are. I think that's a legitimately good team. Yeah,
and the defense is good. They're not as aggressive as they had been in the past, but they're playing very well. At least very efficiently, and the offense is playing efficiently. And what else do you want? They're an efficient football team from top to bottom. They're not the most impressive. I mean, they're
not fun to watch. I mean, you don't go, wow.
Really, This is where they rank in terms of offense. They're 16th in passing yards, but 28th in rushing. In terms of defense, they're 32nd in passing yards, but 3rd in rushing defense. So they're kind of all over the place, but it comes together for kind of very just efficient, kind of run along type football team. They're definitely not the most impressive, but they do have the best record. They're beating the teams that are on their schedule, and they're starting to pull away a little bit in the NFC West. And I don't think there's any scenario where the Cardinals aren't a playoff team this year after the way everything else has gone down.
It would take a real huge collapse on their part, because really, looking at the NFC, they're 2 wins away from definitely being in wild card contention, and 3 wins away from probably having a real legitimate shot at that division. So, yeah, they're not fun to watch. They're not exciting to watch. They just win, and that's what counts, is the wins.
Yep.
Style points don't matter in the NFL. But before we move on from this one with the Cowboys, what the hell is the thinking with Tony Romo here? The guy's got 2 fractured vertebrae, and they're still talking about playing him?
Because this is the Dallas Cowboys. It's what they do.
Well, yeah, you want to kill the guy?
If it would get them, if it would get them one more win in the standings, yeah.
Well,
you know that's true, because they've done this so many times before, where they try so hard to do anything to just they'll sacrifice anything for a win. And I mean, they've done it with Tony Romo before with his back.
Yeah,
it's not like this is a new thing. And it's kind of sad, to be perfectly honest.
It really is. It's kind of scary, because this is a broken back. That's nothing to mess with.
No,
this is something that could leave that guy paralyzed. God knows what all. But I just have one question: when did Jerry Jones get a medical degree?
Well, when did Jerry Jones get qualified to be a general manager? Either.
Yeah, but you could. Okay, here's the difference there. You can buy a football team and make yourself the general manager. You can't buy a hospital and make yourself the chief surgeon. You still have to have the qualifications,
Maybe not. But it's interesting, like, especially they're pushing so hard to get him back this next week against Jacksonville in London, right?
Yeah.
But then they have the bye week after that. You're playing Jacksonville. I think Brandon Weeden can be decent enough to beat Jacksonville.
All you got to do is turn DeMarco Murray loose on the Jaguars, and just Weeden. He's not a good quarterback, but he's enough to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars when you've got everything else that goes with that team. I don't understand. If they've got a bye week following this, you got to think that, just sit him down. And
it's 2 bye weeks. Just let him relax.
Yeah, and heal up, and then you've got a real shot.
Right,
but,
and they come back for a Sunday night game against the Giants.
And another thing to think about in this, too, is that, your quarterback we don't know how long he's going to be out. We know for certain that Nick Foles of the Eagles is the team that you're chasing in this division.
Yep.
Is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. So you got some time.
They're on the Mark Sanchez train.
Oh, boy.
And they still have to play the Eagles twice down the stretch, too.
Right. So if Foles was healthy and all that, I could almost understand the logic behind playing Romo against a Jaguars team in London. I mean, he's going to be, like an 8-10 hour flight to get over there?
Yeah.
All the other stuff that goes with that, with the guy with the bad back, let him. I wouldn't even take him with me. I'd leave him in Dallas and say, you know what, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But
and that's the other thing, is things are now starting to coalesce there for Denver, at least, or Dallas, excuse me, with the injuries to Foles. And they've had some injuries on defense. The Eagles have too, with DeMeco Ryans. The Eagles could slip down a little bit, just as a matter of circumstance.
Right.
And Dallas could keep moving up. So I think that they're going to be a playoff team unless something catastrophic happens. And I mean, looking at their schedule, I don't see any place for catastrophic. I mean, they play the Colts later in the year, but and they're only they play the Bears, the Eagles twice, the Giants again, Washington. So they're going to be fine. They're probably going to make the playoffs, and if they just cruise along, they're probably just going to win the division by default.
Well, that's the thing. So
there is no reason to push them. You're right.
And with Foles being out for the time he's going to be out, that all of a sudden puts the NFC East in a position where 9 games probably takes that division. So why risk your quarterback right now when you've really got, like what we just described, you've got a perfect stretch here where you could rest Romo and you're not losing a thing at this point. I just don't see Mark Sanchez. I've heard, Chip Kelly's great with quarterbacks and all that. That's fine, and he is. But this is Mark Sanchez we're talking about here, who at the very height of his game was slightly below average. I don't see Mark Sanchez as being this great reclamation project for Chip Kelly. The guy's good, but he's not that good. And I don't know. We'll see what the Cowboys do, but I'd leave Romo home and wouldn't make him do anything until after the bye week, and then I'd reassess it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's move on and talk about those Eagles and talk about Mark Sanchez. Came in through 202 yards and 2 touchdowns to lead the Philadelphia Eagles to a 31-21 win in Houston. Again, Nick Foles out with a broken collarbone. I believe that's what he was diagnosed with. Going to be out for, I think, at least 4 weeks.
I heard between 6 and 8, but I don't know if the injury is similar to the one Aaron Rodgers had last year, but it took Aaron Rodgers a full 8 weeks to come back from that injury last season.
Yeah, collarbones are all different. If it's a fracture, hairline fracture, compound fracture, it depends on how it broke. But
you know for a fact that he's gone for at least a month. That much we're sure of.
Yeah. But so Mark Sanchez comes in. I guess he beat out Matt Barkley for the second string job there, which is also funny because the USC connections.
Yeah.
But I think for the Eagles to get through this stretch, they're going to have to lean heavy on LaShawn McCoy. And he came into this game with 23 carries, 117 yards, no touchdowns. But the Eagles still 6-2.
It's going to be interesting with the Eagles. I'm not ready to. I can't believe. Did you even know Mark Sanchez was still in the league until this happened? I didn't.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I remembered he was the backup quarterback there.
Okay.
But it's for him to come in and be effective was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, well, he's been effective before, but that's the thing with this guy.
Well, not even this effective though. After all the time of not being good or being kind of thrown under the bus like we had thought.
I will say this: if Chip Kelly can manage to resurrect Mark Sanchez, then you know what, the guy's the greatest quarterback genius of all time is what I will say, because Sanchez was never good when he was good. He was okay. And he was on those Jets teams that had a great defense, pretty good running game and all that, and he just had to kind of stay out of the way and not break anything, and they would win games.
Yeah.
So
but at the same time, when he was playing for USC for the 2 years he was there, who was the coach at Oregon?
Chip Kelly. Right.
Chip Kelly knows a whole lot about how Mark Sanchez plays, and knows how he can play at his best, because that's when Sanchez was at his best, when he was playing with SC, and even then that wasn't the greatest. He probably could have stood another year to stay at USC with the Trojans. But the other big injury for the Eagles is their linebacker D'Amico Ryans. He had an interception against Ryan Fitzpatrick and was injured on the play. Tore his right Achilles tendon.
Oh.
And he's been a big key for that Eagles defense. Kind of one of the more underrated parts of this Eagles team, because we always talk about the offense and how fast they play. But defense, not terrible there for the Eagles.
Well, you haven't seen a lot of 48-47 games with this Eagles team. I mean, they haven't been giving up a ton of points,
No.
So it's too bad for the Eagles, because I thought with the way the NFC was shaping up this year, they had a real shot at making some noise, but you lose your starting quarterback, and that just hurts. So But again, like you said, Chip Kelly knows Mark Sanchez, and Mark Sanchez came in. I mean, 15 to 22 for 202 and a couple TDs. That's not bad. And for Mark Sanchez, that's pretty damn good, actually.
Yep. And looking at their schedule down the road, they play Carolina again this week. Then they go to Green Bay. They still have to play Dallas twice. They still have to play Seattle. The Eagles, if Mark Sanchez isn't the answer, if he can't play like he did on Sunday, and the defense can't fill in for Ryans, this thing could come crashing down pretty quick.
They could go south on them in a hurry, yeah. But that's, it's just going to be they're intriguing now, because I would love to see Sanchez do well, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. We'll move on to the other earlier games. The Chiefs with a 24-10 win over the New York Football Jets. Mike Vick got the start for the Jets in this one, but he got hurt at one point. Looked like he almost had a concussion.
That was a surprise, huh?
And yeah, right. But and he came back in. But to no avail, as the Chiefs come away with a relatively easy win at home. The Bengals, a 33-23 win in the cat fight against the Jaguars. A tight one against Jacksonville, and Cincinnati's they started to turn around and win some games, but they're not nearly as impressive as they were to start off this year. And Blake Bortles,
he had a pretty good game.
Yeah, he's doing well. He's not getting killed like we all thought he was going to when he came in to start playing for this team, and maybe he is the answer for the Jacksonville Jaguars going forth.
Well, I think he is, and I just want to take a second to talk about Denard Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that the guy that picks up Denard Robinson for his fantasy football team is an absolute genius because
that might have been me. I might have beaten you.
But seriously, I'm surprised by that because he was too small to play quarterback, but I always thought he was kind of too small to play running back in the NFL too. But he's been very effective for the past couple of weeks for the Jags. So that's a nice find by them. And
well, he always had trouble against Ohio State in college, so he's just taking it out on the
is that it?
On the Browns and Bengals, yeah. Yeah, that's just the Michigan Wolverine deep inside of him.
Well, but I think you talked about it last week. This is a good lesson for Tim Tebow. Look at what happened here.
Mm-hmm. It's a good lesson for Tim Tebow. I don't know if it's the same kind of lesson for Johnny Manziel. I don't know if Manziel has the same kind of versatility.
No, I don't think he does.
Take on a different position. But I'm trying to think of guys in college right now. Probably, the quarterback for Mississippi State, Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
He's kind of a Tim Tebow type mold.
Yeah.
He could come in and be that type of guy.
But the Bengals, they're 5-2-1, which I guess the more wins you put in front of it, that one doesn't look as bad. Mm-hmm. But man, I don't know. They were
technically in first place.
They were so impressive the first few weeks of the season, but lately they're winning. And again, we don't give out style points in the NFL, but they just seem to have dropped it back a level since the start of the season. Yeah,
definitely. They were playing so perfectly those first 3 weeks. I think if you remember when they were 3-0, I think they hadn't turned the ball over at all or given up a sack at that point.
Something like that, yeah.
And we know just in the way that football works in general, that's entirely unsustainable. Like, you're going to turn the ball over.
Right.
You're going to get hit sometime.
Right.
And it hit them hard for a few weeks, and they're right there. It's with this division, it's easily the most competitive division.
Every team in that division is over 500, right?
Yeah, they all have at least 5 wins.
Wow.
But at the same time, it's also one of those things where it's just one of those snake eating its own tail type things.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how that plays out.
Well, they have a real test this Thursday with the Cleveland Browns coming to town.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, with the Browns coming in, it's and again, Thursday night game. Anything goes. Thursday night football, crazy.
You can see Brian Hoyer pass for 520 yards and 6 touchdowns, and it wouldn't seem that weird because it's Thursday.
Yeah, but again, like if the Browns go in there and they're 6-3 or 6-3, right? Not 6-4.
Yeah, they'd be 6-3 if they win this. Yeah,
6-3, and the Bengals would be 5-3-1. But even then, like as cool as it would be to have the Browns at least tied for first place this late in the season at some point, it also would be not ultimately meaningless because then they're only 35% of the Bengals or whatever it would be. This is the thing that's just going to kind of go back and forth, and everyone's going to take their time in first place at some point.
That tie is going to play such a huge role in this division before it's all said and done. And
so it's so crazy how that's going to play out just because of that.
Yeah.
You know? Rather than just having tiebreakers, it's going to be an actual tie that will break it.
Right.
So, anyway.
Like, let's say everybody in the division finishes with 9 wins. The Bengals win the division because they went 9-6-1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Browns won a division at 9-6-1 years ago. I don't remember what year it was, but they tied the Kansas City Chiefs in the ugliest football game I've ever watched. That's how bad it was. I still remember it all these years later. It was just the most horrible football game I'd ever watched. 10-10.
Ties are usually – there's no good game that ends in a tie.
But this wasn't a 37-37 tie like the Bengals and Panthers was. This was a 10-10 tie.
Yeah.
So it was just horrible football. But I digress.
Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move from the Jaguars to their other Florida tealish team, the Miami Dolphins. Where'd they come from?
I don't know.
37-0 win over the San Diego Chargers, a team that many had anointed as the hot team in the AFC, and they've taken a tumble here in the last couple of weeks to being shut out on the road in a just absolute rout. Nothing worked for the Chargers on Sunday.
I think of all the games we've seen this season, this is the one that surprised me the most. This is the one I would have least expected. I'm not surprised the Dolphins beat the Chargers at home, but to shut them out 37-0, I can't imagine anyone predicted that.
No, and like we mentioned last week, it was one of the earlier kind of playoff implication type games. Whoever, if the Dolphins had lost, we'd probably say, okay, they're done. If they were 4-4,
right?
Everybody else was kind of just getting 5 wins and moving up. Then they're at the end of the line when it comes to the playoff talk. But now they're right in the thick of it with everybody else. And San Diego, with Kansas City winning, San Diego has moved from being first place a few weeks ago before they played Denver to now being all the way down in third in that division. And, the tenuous positions of where they were last year of struggling to make that second wild card spot.
Well, they're just so – this is so typical Chargers. I mean, they do this you can't blame Norv Turner anymore. So what's the issue now?
Yeah, it's funny to see some of our Chargers friends that we know well.
Now what's the excuse?
New things to complain about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the story is with this team because they looked dominant until they got to that Denver game, and then it was just I don't know if they just said, "Hey, wait a minute, we're not as good as we thought we were," but. With this Dolphins team, another one we had written off because they had that nice opening week win against the Patriots.
Yeah. And
then they kind of just fell right off the cliff for a while, and we're like, okay, everybody overrated them. But now they've put together a pretty impressive streak of wins here, and this one being the most impressive of all, and they're right in the hunt.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill with the best game of his career, according to ESPN's QBR rankings. The 3 best QBR games of Ryan Tannehill's career have come in his last 5 starts. So he's pulling it together. They're playing well, and
if he figures it out, that makes them a completely different team if they've got a good quarterback as opposed to just the serviceable type quarterback that he had been up to this point in his career.
Yeah, he's even so. I still think he's going to be one of those guys that just kind of goes up and down his entire career.
I don't think we're going to see him step up to be like at the level of an Andrew Luck or the top guys. But
no, he's. I think at best he could be like Andy Dalton,
right?
Right, and lead a semi-successful team some weeks, and then be the reason they lose other weeks. But he was good today or on Sunday, 288 with 3 touchdowns. Good day for him, the Dolphins, as they stay alive midway through this NFL season.
I would have never guessed they'd be 5-3 at this point after the way they started out. So they've gotten up off the mats and they're doing a good job.
Yeah, well, we didn't think they'd be 5-3 with the way they started, but I think before the year, this is what people thought that the Dolphins were going to do.
Right.
They were finally going to be this kind of contending team. And even last year, they were kind of in the playoff or the wild card hunt late, and they fell off. But
yeah, they had
everybody was in it last year. But yeah.
They lost 2 completely winnable games last year, if I remember right. They lost to just 2 dregs of the NFL last season to finish out the year, and it cost them a playoff spot.
Yeah. Also, the Chargers, 4 turnovers. That'll probably lose you a football game.
Yeah, more often than not.
Yeah. We'll move on to Minnesota, where Washington went in, and RG3 coming back here for Washington. I don't know why they even bothered, but he was semi-effective, 251, 1 touchdown, 18-28, but ultimately for nothing as the Vikings get 15 points in the fourth quarter and knock off Washington 29-26 amid the protesters outside the stadium in Minnesota.
Yeah. The Vikings, like I said, these Vikings, they're becoming pesky, and taking away. Look, I'm not endorsing this by any measure, but if Adrian Peterson comes back and it doesn't disrupt anything or anything like that, these guys could get real tough all of a sudden.
Yeah,
because Teddy Bridgewater's looking to be a pretty good quarterback.
The day that Adrian Peterson comes back, by the way, if he does this year, it will be the greatest waiver wire football day in fantasy football history. You know how many people are going to just rush to their computer to be the guy to get Adrian Peterson?
Yeah, I know. I thought about that today when I was looking over my fantasy team. I thought, how many people will take a run at him. And
because I have Gerard McKinnon, the current starting quarterback or running back for the Vikings. I would take Adrian Peterson over him.
Oh, sure. So
because,
would I.
You don't get negative points for child beating in fantasy football.
Yeah, it just becomes an ethical question at that point, I suppose, is fantasy football important enough? But then again,
the other thing is if you're judging someone's ethics on their fantasy football team, you need different priorities.
Exactly. That was my next point. But by the same token, it's just a bunch of numbers on a computer screen, so who gives a shit, really?
Yeah.
But I mean, hey, I went out and grabbed Josh Gordon today, 2 weeks ahead of time because I knew that the rush would be on next week. So I'm going to beat the Christmas rush and grab him now because my team needs wide receiver help in the worst way.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on from a couple of probably not so great teams to another surprisingly couple of not so great football teams. The St. Louis Rams 2-game winning streak, Greg.
They can't beat anybody bad, but you give them a good team, they got no problem.
Oh yeah, and this one it was tight throughout. The Rams get a field goal. The Rams get a field goal there in the fourth quarter, and the 49ers are able to march down in the final minutes to the Rams goal line. And the game in Colin Kaepernick's hands. They try a quarterback sneak. Not only is he stopped, he fumbles it on the goal line as the Rams recover and seal off a 13-10 road victory over the 49ers. Rams are 3-5, 49ers are 4-4. And I don't think the Rams are going to be making the playoffs anytime soon, but I don't think the 49ers are going to either, and that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's well, first off, I almost think that the ball did break the plane, but there was just no way to tell with the replay angles they had on that play at the end of the game. I'm going to beat this drum as long as I can beat it. The Colin Kaepernick thing. He's just not a good quarterback. There's just no other way to put it. He's not. And where's Ron Jaworski now? Colin Kaepernick could go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. Well, he could, but he's not going to. Come on. If I had a choice right now to make between RG3, Andrew Luck, and Colin Kaepernick, I'm probably taking RG3 or Kaepernick over Luck. Really? That would have been a really smart move. It's just
definitely not anymore. 8 sacks, by the way, for the Rams in this game over the 49ers.
Wow.
Their defense has really stepped up over the last few weeks, and that was one of their calling cards, and you just wonder what this team would have done even if Sam Bradford were healthy.
Right.
Because Austin Davis has been fine, and Sam Bradford's not a world beater by any sense. But if he could have been in a few of these games, maybe they're not 3-5, maybe they're 5-3, and they're right there with Seattle and in wild card contention.
Well, another way to think about it too is this defense that's actually pretty good. Just think if even maybe once they had held on to one of those leads they had.
True, yeah. If they had held on to lead against what was it, the Cowboys and the Eagles?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the way it works in the NFL. But these guys, they're not an easy out. But they, like I said, man, you put the 49ers and Seahawks in front of them, they got no issues. It's playing the bad teams they can't seem to get past.
We'll move on to the afternoon games, and there was only 2 of them this week. With the Broncos taking on the Patriots. Brady Manning 16, big letdown. Again, the reports of Tom Brady's demise greatly exaggerated.
Just a bit.
333 yards, 4 touchdowns, 24 points in the second quarter, en route to a 43-21 win over Manning and the Broncos. And we were wondering earlier this year, maybe the Patriots, are they done? They are the downside. And they've run off a slew of impressive victories, and now they sit atop the AFC with a 7-2 record and they're a half game behind the Cardinals for the best game or best record in the National Football League.
Yeah, I was one of those people that said this might be the year that they fall off, and we could see somebody else slip in and win that division. Yeah, probably not at this point. I just don't know. I don't know what to make out of this. Peyton Manning just I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. This one surprised me too. I mean, it was just a blowout. It was over at halftime, basically.
Yeah, and it's strange how the last few of these Brady Manning games have gone because they've kind of gone like that. You look at the playoff game where the Broncos were ahead of the Patriots the whole time. It wasn't really in doubt. And you look to last year when the Broncos were up big on the Patriots at halftime, also in New England. I don't know why they played this game 2 years in a row in New England. And then the Patriots came back for that big overtime victory off the Wes Welker fumbled punt. But it's I don't know. The Brady Manning games have kind of started to lose their luster as both of them get to later on in their careers.
Well, not only that, but it's just there's so many of them now. It's just not as much fun because it's a yearly thing. I don't know how these two teams end up always playing each other every season. I mean,
it's the first place schedules.
Yeah,
when you're a first place team and when you're a good team and you're both good teams for pretty much the entirety of your runs,
yeah,
you're going to play each other every year.
It's just, but this is going to bring up the whole Brady versus Manning argument again, and
and Donovan McNabb on Fox Sports 1 after the game said something to the effect of, when you put the two next to each other, Peyton Manning can't stand next to Tom Brady. It's like,
okay,
yeah, maybe head to head. Yeah, like I know. I think Brady has a 10-5 record against Peyton Manning led teams. But the other interesting thing with the win over the Broncos yesterday, or on Sunday, there is now no team in the NFL with a winning record against Tom Brady.
Really?
Yeah. Every team has a losing record against Tom Brady and the Patriots.
Well, that's a pretty good argument to make for his stature as a quarterback, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know what? I mean,
because usually even the best quarterbacks have that one team that just give them fits.
Right.
But not the case with Brady, apparently.
Well, I'll just say this about the whole argument about the two. As a Cleveland Browns fan, I'll take either one of them. It doesn't matter to me, really.
Yeah.
It's just the whole thing, regular season problems, Manning can't win the big games and all that. Sure, okay, fine. So you don't want him as a quarterback? Okay, fine, I'll take him. I just get tired of it. It's just because he lost to Tom Brady, it's like all of a sudden Manning sucks now.
This is interesting. In Tom Brady and Peyton Manning's career, the 16 games they've played against each other, 10 of those games have been in New England.
Well, yeah. And what's the record? What are they, 10-5 against each other?
Yeah, I think it says Brady has an 8-2 record in those 10 home games. That'll help.
Sure.
If they played more games in Indy, if they played more games in Denver, because I know for a fact that Brady's bad in Denver. That's one of his things.
Right.
And that's probably why the Broncos were the last team for him to get a winning record against. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm just tired of the whole debate. They're both fantastic quarterbacks. They're both in any list of the top 10 quarterbacks has to include these two guys.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, these teams are both probably going to win their divisions. They're probably both going to get the top two buys in the AFC. And barring something weird, they're probably going to be in the AFC Championship game against each other again.
Right. Yeah. Right now, it comes down to these two have got to fight it out for home field advantage because that's going to make all the difference. That's what it's going to boil down to.
I mean, if this game's back in New England, the needle swings back to the Patriots.
Right.
Whereas last year when the game was in Denver, it was definitely in the Broncos' favor.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Definitely, it's always a fun game to watch, but not so much when it goes like that. And I was in Denver for this game, and I was in one of the bars across the street from the Pepsi Center before the Ducks Avalanche game. And, that's a Broncos town, man.
Oh, yeah.
Far and away, it's a Broncos town. And I drove by Mile High Stadium, which is pretty big, if you could imagine.
Is it still there?
Well,
you're talking about the new one.
Sports Authority Field at Mile High.
Oh, that one, yeah. I thought you meant the old one.
No.
We talked about it on basically a sports show. I think Denver, overall, is the best sports city in America.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They have love for all their teams.
Yep.
The Avs got pretty good support. There was a couple empty sections up at the top, but they were still all over the place. And they were actually pretty nice people.
Yeah.
And as you saw from all the pictures, Colorado, beautiful part of the country.
Oh my God, that picture you posted, I forget what you called it, but
it's called Garden of the Gods. It's a park there.
Aptly named, I would say.
Yeah, it's a nice little part of this great country of ours. Go get if anybody ever gets a chance to visit Colorado, whether it's in the winter or in the summer and fall, spring, anytime, it's a beautiful thing to look at, especially with the Rockies and all that sort of fun stuff. But back to the football before we get lost in a daydream.
Yeah, we can go off. We can go off the down the Denver wormhole on Thursday.
Yeah. The last of the afternoon games, Seahawks and Raiders, a tighter game than it probably should have been. But at the end of the day, the Raiders still winless, 0-8, and the Seahawks 5-3, still second place in the NFC West.
Yeah, this was. I really thought the Raiders, they were in this thing the whole way.
Yep, 3 turnovers by the Raiders. If they hold on to the football,
yeah,
maybe they get a win in Seattle, which would have been.
Oh, that would have been
crazy.
it for the Seahawks. If they go down to the 0-7 Raiders in Seattle, we'd never hear the end of it. But I think the Seahawks are clearly a victim of the Super Bowl hangover, and we talked about it last week. There's a lot of internal strife going on out there, so they're still hanging on, but I don't see them as a Super Bowl favorite at this point. Now, they could put it together still and make a run, but right now, this is a team that's shaky. They're having trouble beating a team that they should have blown out at home. That's just not a good sign.
Mm-hmm. And we'll look at the Sunday night game as the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger are just red hot. 6 touchdowns again for Ben Roethlisberger, 22 points in the second quarter. He has 12 touchdowns in his last 2 games in what ultimately was a rout. 22 points in the second quarter, 21 points in the fourth quarter for a 43-23 win over the Baltimore Ravens, who are now in last place, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are mere percentage points behind the Bengals in the AFC North.
Well, see, now the Steelers are 6-3, so I think that puts that. I think they're 0.15% behind, or 0.15 games behind the Bengals, or ahead of them, or something.
They are 0.021.
Okay, but I don't. Where did this come from with the Steelers? I don't get this.
I don't understand. They've never been this type of football team before.
Never. It was always the defense was their calling card. Good running game, and Ben would pass when he had to. And
I can understand. I can understand this type of game against the Colts last week because the Colts defense was a little banged up. They were on the road. It happens. But in this game in particular, the Ravens and Steelers, they're always those hard-nosed, tough them out, fight them off type of football games. And there was a lot of kind of pushing and shoving there late in the game. But ultimately, the Ravens are a better defensive football team than the Colts are. And the Steelers, could someone just triple cover Antonio Brown? Would that be hard to do?
I think
because that's the only guy that Ben throws to.
Well, I'm sure they are at least double covering him, and it doesn't seem to matter at this point. I just can't get over this. I mean, of all the ways, I thought the Steelers. I think I said at the beginning of the season, the Steelers ended up rising up and winning this division. Because it's just a weak division, but
the football wasn't the way we thought they were going to do it.
No, I didn't. 6 touchdowns, 6 TD passes a game for Ben Roethlisberger. That never entered into my reasoning for why they would do this. But hey, they're getting it done. But you know what? Like you said earlier, this is something that's also unsustainable. They aren't going to throw for 6 TDs every week.
No, of course not.
So, but here they are. It's 6-3, and the next 2 games are pretty easy games. I mean, they could end up 8-3 on the other side of these next 2 games, and all of a sudden that puts them right in the thick of everything.
Well, the other thing to remember with the Steelers team, they lost to the Buccaneers.
Yeah,
at some point this season,
and the Browns blew them out.
Yeah. So as high and mighty as they are right now, they're also a team that's very susceptible to a big loss at some point.
Yeah, I think you're seeing the pendulum swing in extreme directions with the Steelers team. Lose to the Buccaneers, get blown out by the Browns, and then just smoke the Colts and smoke the Ravens like this. So somewhere in the middle between all that is the real Pittsburgh Steelers. And I still think that's enough to win the division.
Yeah, and because they still have a few games there against the AFC or NFC South with the New Orleans and Atlanta. So we'll see how that plays out. But they're right in the middle of that AFC North thing that's up there. And on Monday nights...
Just real quick,
sure.
With every team being at least 5-4 in that division, can we really say it's a bad division?
No, it's not a bad division.
Okay.
But it's also not a great division.
No.
Because I was watching on the plane, the Southwest gives you certain channels that you're able to watch, and one of them was the NFL Network. So I was watching NFL AM, which is an awful show. A morning show on the NFL. Hey. And they asked the question, is the AFC North the best division in football?
Oh, God, no.
And one of the guys was like, well, that's not how I define the best division. I forget who it was. I think it was Eric Davis. And And what he said was he defines the best division of football as the division that has the best team in football in it. So, which also doesn't make sense. So they all said the NFC West, which I could probably agree with because the Rams are the last place team and they're still very good.
I don't know. Well, yeah, I mean, they're probably got the toughest teams. I mean, I don't know that you could look at any of those teams and go, that's an easy win. But
right. Well, that's how I would define best division is top to bottom hard.
Yeah, I guess
anybody could beat any of these AFC North teams. They could also lose to any of them. But
the Buccaneers and Jags both have one win each. And who did those wins come against? AFC North teams.
Yep, very true.
So that pretty much settles that argument, I guess.
Very true. We'll move on to Monday nights, and the Colts still aren't dead. And if it wasn't for Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck would be the hottest quarterback in the NFL right now. 354 yards, 4 touchdowns in a 40-24 bounce back on the road at the New York Giants. Good game for Luck and the Colts, and Eli Manning wasn't terrible, but the Giants are 3-5. Yeah.
So not
as bad as last year, but
I think they're better than they were last year, but they're still not great. But Andrew Luck, I heard this today. His last 5 road games, he's averaging 350 yards passing, and on the road. That's not bad. And just to go back to the Colin Kaepernick argument again, now who would you rather have? Andrew Luck, last 5 games on the road, at least 350 yards passing against the Colts last night. 25 of 46, 354 for 4 TDs. Okay? If anybody's going to go down as possibly the next greatest quarterback of all time, it ain't Colin Kaepernick. I can tell you that. But I'll get off. I just love to beat on
the choir, man. He's on my team.
I know. I'm just saying.
I'll take him every day of the week.
I'm preaching to the audience here because there were a lot of people that felt this way, and it's just like you just can't. It was stupid back then, and boy, does it look stupid now. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. No, and even then, people were once Russell Wilson kind of rose up, and now that he's won a Super Bowl, people wanted to throw him into the conversation. Well, maybe you'd rather have Russell Wilson because he's effective. It's like, well, no. Like imagine what the Seahawks would be doing with Andrew Luck.
Oh God,
yeah. Like if you would give Andrew Luck a Seattle Seahawks defense, it wouldn't have. They would have been an even better team last year.
Let's trade Kaepernick and Luck straight up right now. And put Luck on the 49ers. How much better do they get?
49ers are probably 7-1 too.
Yeah, or let's put Andrew Luck. Let's put him in Arizona with that team with
they're
Ellington
probably undefeated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let's put Colin Kaepernick in Arizona. Are they still going to be 7-1? Nope.
Oh no, they're probably going to be 4-4.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And Russell Wilson, he had a great game yesterday. 17 of 35 for $179, no touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Great game. Yeah, I'll take him over Luck. Look, I'm not like I'm not Andrew Luck's press agent or anything. I just thought that argument was silly back when people were making it because they just look like real idiots now, especially Ron Jaworski. Wow, what a dumb thing to say. But I digress.
Yeah, and yes, Andrew Luck does have a funny voice, but doesn't mean he's not a good quarterback.
Well, you know what? I want to run this past you because I heard this on the Dan Patrick Show right before we came on. They were talking about Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
And I think it was Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk Weekly.
Yeah, he's a genius.
He said that he thinks that the reason that Luck is doing so much better than the other young quarterbacks is because he didn't take any endorsement deals. He didn't want to be singled out from the team and all that. And it seems to be working.
I don't know if that's a singular reason. I think that's just his personality.
But you know what I mean, though.
Every time you hear him answer a question, it's always, it's a team effort, and they're a good football team. We got to put in the effort, and he's very self-effacing. He just kind of.
That's what I mean. I don't mean that makes him a better player than those guys, but I think that's what's avoided the issues you're seeing with like Russell Wilson's not well liked by the Seahawks.
Well, the thing is, Russell Wilson tries to put out the same aura that Andrew Luck does, where it's all about the team and all that. But as has been documented, his is so much more calculated.
Oh, it's fake.
Yeah, it's completely manufactured. Whereas Andrew Luck's it's just natural. That's just what he does. He's a very team-oriented, hard worker, kind of unassuming, just goes about his business. And I mean, even Peyton Manning, Peyton Manning has the same type of attitude, but he's a little bit more forceful with it, I think, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Whereas Andrew Luck's just kind of, he just goes to work and then he goes home. and he he just does his job. He definitely has the right attitude to be a long-term successful quarterback. It's almost I guess the way to compare his attitude would almost be Tom Brady like.
Yeah.
He's not the golden boy with the supermodels on his arm just yet, and I don't think he ever will be if he keeps that giant muskrat on his face. But he just goes in and does his job. He doesn't need the endorsements. I'm sure he'll get them. I'm sure once Peyton Manning goes away and Tom Brady goes away, somebody has to take,
Yeah, but I'm sure he's been offered. Is the thing I'm saying here? He's been offered endorsements. I'm sure he just doesn't take them.
Yeah, and also I guess the more I think about it, he's also not the prettiest quarterback.
No,
right?
No.
So he's not going to get some of the more visual endorsements anyway.
Right. Well, but let's be honest. Peyton Manning's not exactly a GQ model either.
No, but Peyton Manning has the personality.
Yeah.
And Andrew Luck doesn't have the Peyton kind of happy-go-lucky personality. Like he could never do any of the things that Peyton does, or even when Eli's been dragged into like some of the DirecTV commercials. That's nothing that Andrew Luck would ever do.
Yeah.
God, this is a kid that went to Stanford and he's still trying to get his architecture degree. He's
just in case this quarterback thing doesn't work out for him.
Yeah. So it's just. That's just who he is. It's just his frame of mind.
Well, anyway, this Colts
maybe it helps. I'm sure it does.
This Colts team is 6-3. They're only a game off the pace with everybody else, and yeah. I just the thing with them, and you've talked about it. They're so inconsistent. They can beat anybody. It's just a matter of will they or not, and which team shows up.
And they've been better this year, and I think the defense has been a little improved. Vontae Davis came back this week and played well against the Giants. So we'll see. That's still the area that I wish they would improve is the defense and, of course, the running game.
Yeah.
But I think at this point the running game is just a lost cause.
Pretty much.
It's maybe they could draft a running back next year, but drafting running backs is such a crapshoot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's like we mentioned, Norton Robinson is being effective as a running back in this league right now. So
yeah, I think that maybe the best route to go the way Denver used to do it back when Mike Shanahan was still the coach there, where they would find these guys in the 5th, 6th round and go out and they'd have 1,000-yard rushing seasons. I mean, there is value to be found in the later rounds, but I think after the Trent Richardson disaster, you're not going to see many running backs go if they're not going to go that high in the first round if they go in the first round at all.
Yeah,
it'll be late.
And to be honest, I mean, Ahmad Bradshaw is the starter right now, and he's been very effective in terms of receiving the ball out of the backfield, and that's
right.
That's been a huge help. So I think that's where the running game comes. They run the ball just so they can run the play action,
right?
And then any sort of running game is just short passes to Bradshaw or Trent Richardson or whoever. So I don't know, it's working. I'm not going to worry too much about it. And like we said last week, that game against the Steelers, complete aberration. That doesn't happen. That's 1 out of 100 times that might happen.
Well, yeah, and they ran into a team that proved again.
Right, exactly.
That they're just red hot right now.
Right. We'll look ahead to next week really quick. There are 6 teams again on a bye.
Oh, God.
Indianapolis, Minnesota, New England, San Diego, Washington, and Houston, all on byes. So we look to the games, and as we said, Thursday, Browns-Bengals, the battle for Ohio. Excitement. They should play this game in Columbus and just meet halfway.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, but they would never do that.
No, they would never do that.
Too much money. We'll move to Sunday. 5-3 Chiefs, 5-3 Bills. Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
One of those teams probably knocked out of the wild card race, maybe not.
Great uniform matchup, that much for sure.
That one's early contender for Greg's top 5.
Right.
Dolphins-Lions, 5-3, 6-2 in Detroit.
That's going to be a very interesting game. Let's see if Detroit's legit.
Which of these teams is more legit is what comes out of that game probably.
Right.
Are the Dolphins ready to play? Are the Lions ready to play? Cowboys go over to London to play the Jaguars.
Oh, for the love of God, I wish they would just end these stupid London games, or at least just limit it to 1 a year.
Well, we're sorry, London.
Yeah.
Sorry. 49ers Saints, 2 4-4 teams meeting up in New Orleans.
Oh, that could get real ugly. This 49ers team's not playing well at all, and we've seen what the Saints can do at home.
Yep. Titans Ravens, Steelers Jets.
That's another contender for my uniform list.
Steelers Jets?
Yeah.
Falcons Buccaneers.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry. Whatever poor sections of the country that get stuck with that football game, I am very, very sorry.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning and the Broncos get to take their frustrations on the Raiders in Oakland.
Oh, that'll be ugly.
Mm-hmm. A sneaky good game, I think, is Rams-Cardinals in Arizona next week.
Yeah. That Rams team, they're a step above pesky. That defense can play, and if they can score some points, but I think I think if this game's in St. Louis, it's got a much better shot at St. Louis getting the win. But in Arizona, I think the Cardinals they'll be okay.
Giants at Seahawks, and the Sunday night game, the legendary rivalry of the NFC North, Bears at Packers.
Well, I know basically a sports show host will be losing his mind over this one.
He probably won't even watch it.
Well, it'd probably be better for it if he doesn't.
Yeah. And Monday night is Panthers-Eagles.
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah, big deal. So that is the NFL. Let's go to college. We'll start on Thursday, as we were talking about this as it was happening on basically a sports show. The Louisville Cardinal, number 25 in the playoff rankings, initial playoff rankings, they had put a scare into the Florida State Seminoles, but the number 2 team in the country, with a 21-point fourth quarter to avoid the upset at, as Greg would call it, Louisville, 42-31. Florida State still undefeated, but still highly unimpressive.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game that really Louisville had a real shot at winning this, and they weren't just upsetting Florida State in that first. They were dominating them. But
21 points in the second quarter for the Cardinals.
But props to the Seminoles for coming back and getting the win. And I'll tell you what I think happened too is I think Louisville got too conservative in the second half, and that might have hurt them a little bit. But Florida State still number 2, still not terribly impressive. But until they lose, that's what we're going to have.
Yeah, when we were done with the show, I was trying to watch the fourth quarter of this game, and for some reason, the ESPN3 wasn't showing me the regular broadcast, so I was switching between the Skycam view and the Spanish broadcast, which was a Spanish broadcast of a football game. Segundo y tres, 2nd and 3.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's see, at least you knew what they were saying.
I knew a little bit. I could tell you what first and fourth down were. But it's like, touchdown, Florida. Like,
I'll just say this with Florida State. If they make the playoff, I just don't see them winning. I think they go out in the first round.
They'll lose the first game.
Yeah.
They're winning games, but they're not nearly the team they were last year at any point. But we'll move on to Saturday's full slate of action, and we'll start with the number 1 team in the country, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. They had a bulldog fight against the Arkansas Razorbacks. And Arkansas, they've been giving a lot of teams trouble. They were tight with Alabama. They took Texas A&M to double overtime. Arkansas has been a very pesky team, but still 0-5 in conference as Mississippi State pulls it out late in the fourth quarter with a 17-10 victory.
Do you think that the trouble that Mississippi State had, because they were at home for this too?
Yep.
Do you think that hurts their standing as a number 1 team at all in your mind?
No. I mean, I guess the only thing that can move them up, because Florida State's number 2 and they're undefeated. Now Auburn, we'll talk about Auburn in a second, but they get the big win over Ole Miss, and so that's a ranked win that could vault them over Florida State maybe. But I don't think they're going to move anyone over the undefeated teams.
No,
right now.
No, it would be a real tough argument to make.
Right.
Just at this point, yeah.
I mean, the only undefeated team that isn't being moved up or down anywhere is Marshall, and that's for good reason. But if you're undefeated, you're undefeated, and that's what really that's the first criteria when it comes to making these rankings. Is this late in the season, you're 8-0, you're 5-0 in conference, you're going to get the thing. And I think people they're probably going to take into account how tough Arkansas has played people this year. Even though they are 0-5 in conference, I think they have like a 17-game conference losing streak or something like that. But they've been playing pesky this year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they haven't rolled over for anybody, and that's you got to take that into account. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We'll move on to, as we mentioned, the biggest game of the weekend, the first true elimination game that we've had in college football in forever.
Yeah, but isn't it nice to be able to say that?
Yeah, right. It's to have a game with true stakes because despite Ole Miss being a very good football team all year, 7-2 now, 2 losses, and I'm interested to see. We know they're going to fall in the rankings. It's going to be interesting to see how far they fall. And this was a great football game, back and forth the whole way through. And Auburn comes out on top with a 35-31 win at the end of it all. But we know Auburn is good, and Auburn's now they have a couple of games against ranked teams under their belt, so they're firmly at number 3. They win out, they're going to be in the playoff no matter what, whether they're the SEC champion or whether they're just a one-loss team or what have you.
Going into this game, I thought, okay, because when you see a team like Ole Miss, who I don't think anybody picked them to be ranked as highly as they are this year, you always wonder, are they really this good, or are they just, okay, they knocked off Alabama and et cetera, and now they've got to play a real team, we'll see what happens. And they're this good. They hung right with Auburn, and so it kind of answered any questions I had about them. They're a good football team.
Yeah, Ole Miss is good, but like we mentioned, all these teams in the SEC West are good. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to win and lose the game,
right?
And Auburn came out with it. So Auburn's going to stay at 3. I think, and like I said, Auburn wins out there in the playoff, whether they're SEC champion or whether they're just a one-loss team looking in. It is interesting to see how far they decide to push down Ole Miss. Do they knock them? Do they knock them down to the rest of the 2-loss teams all the way back in the 15, 16, 17 range? Do they say, well, they might have 2 losses, but they're still better than TCU, Michigan State, Kansas State because they lost to the number 3 team only by 4 points,
right?
So
me personally, I'm putting them ahead of some of the one-loss teams.
Yeah, I would too. I would probably put them ahead of. I'd probably put them at either 9 or 10 right now, just because TCU and Michigan State are leading their conferences respectively,
right? And
Alabama only has the 1 loss. But that 1 loss again is to Ole Miss, so maybe Alabama gets knocked down or something. I don't know, but. I would put them about maybe 10, just to be safe.
Yeah, I don't see them falling down behind all the way down to Baylor, Arizona State, Nebraska, Ohio State down there. I don't see that happening.
Because, like you said, they proved themselves to be good, and it's a 4-point loss to the number 3 team in the country. And
even we talked about it a few weeks ago. I still think Auburn's the best team in the country. I'm going to stick by that.
Yeah, no. Even if Auburn stays at 3. I would still probably pick them to win the playoff tournament.
Right.
Because you say they would probably play Florida State in the first round again, and wouldn't that be something to have a national championship rematch in the semifinal?
I think what we're going to see with this playoff when it finally happens this year is that the NCAA and whoever else is in charge is going to go, wow, we were such idiots for not doing this sooner.
Right. Because, imagine this right now. You have Florida State versus Auburn in the first round. You get, the national championship game from last year. Auburn exacts some revenge on the Seminoles. Great. They move on to the national championship game. Then you would have probably Mississippi State versus Oregon, right?
Right.
And that would be a fun football game to watch.
Sure.
And say Oregon beats Mississippi State, and then you have a rematch of another national championship game from a few years ago with Auburn and Oregon. Or you get Mississippi State playing Auburn, and remember Mississippi State was the team that beat Auburn.
Right.
And gave them their 1 loss, and so that'd be an intense rematch. And there's just no way for the NCAA to lose if the rankings were to hold pat right now.
That's why I think that it won't be any time at all before they move this to 8 teams, because they're going to see just how huge this thing's going to be. Monstrously huge. This tournament. It's going to be amazing.
You think that March Madness has the same fun flair? That's all going to be blown out of the water by a Division I football playoff.
Because of college football and just its very nature, that it's just that it's so spread out all over the country. I don't think that people realize just how big it really is. I think that under the right circumstances, it battles the NFL for supremacy as far as American sports go. I mean, if you go in the Southeast, you'll never convince them, like in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, you're never going to convince them the NFL is bigger than college football. It's just never going to happen.
No, I mean, you look at games at Alabama or even Auburn where there are 100,000-seat stadiums in the middle of Alabama.
Yep.
But they sell out. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a completely different atmosphere. It's very special. It's one of the reasons why, we as obvious by the show, we love all types of football, big, small, or otherwise. But if I was forced to choose whether to watch only college football or only NFL football, I would choose college Saturdays over.
I wouldn't even have to think about it. It would be college football without question. It's just. Yep. Now, you can always make the argument, yes, that the NFL, that's the top level. Those are the best athletes. And that's all true.
College is so much more fun.
College is just more fun. It's more entertaining. And, you're not going to see in the NFL, you're not going to see the triple option offense that I love so much that Zach can't stand go up against the spread. You're never going to see that in the NFL. No. But that's what's so great about college football. But, yeah, it's going to be – this thing's going to be huge. And what are we at now? How many games? There's only 4 weeks left, or 4 games left in the regular season at this point.
Yeah, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here.
Closing in on it here, yep.
Let's move on to the Pac-12, where in the past, this was the game in the Pac-12 in the past few years. Stanford and Oregon, but not close. Stanford not up to what they were over the last few years. Oregon comes away with a relatively easy 45-16 victory. And all likelihood, they'll be number 4 in the college playoff come later this evening.
Yep.
Alabama was off, and I assume Alabama will move into number 5 unless TCU jumps them. Because TCU gets a big win on the road at West Virginia, 31-30. And so common opponent between TCU and Alabama now with those two. And both teams are going to be – well, TCU is 7-1. Alabama, I believe, is also 7-1. Yeah. Both teams 7-1, wins over common opponents. But a big win on the road at a ranked team. Maybe TCU jumps Alabama?
Boy, that would be that'd be. I mean, I could see it, but I wouldn't vote for that because I like this TCU team, but I do not think they're better than Alabama.
No, and to be fair, this win was a last-second field goal.
But it
was on the road compared to when Alabama opened the season at the Georgia Dome against West Virginia.
And to TCU's credit, they did not play well in this game at all, really, and they still managed to pull out the win. So that says something about them, but. I can't in good faith say that TCU is a better team than Alabama, but you could see it happen. They could jump them just because of all the stuff you just brought up.
I mean, there's an argument to be made for them to jump them for sure. Well, again, and this is the other thing as we move on from week to week in the releasing of the rankings, we're going to learn a little bit more about what the committee is actually looking at.
Right.
When it comes to wins over ranked teams, whether you're leading your conference, how big the margin of victory is, style points, all that sort of thing. And of course, it's different than when the computer would take all these things in and kind of spit out a number every week. These are all human beings, right? They're all very subjective to just simply changing their minds.
Yeah.
The computer would never say, no, you know what? This stat means more than this stat. Whereas a human could just go into this and be like, yeah, you know what? What the hell? Why not put TCU over Alabama? Just because. just to watch the people in Tuscaloosa squirm. What if they did that? Just like, what if we just want to tweak? What if we just put Alabama down to 20 next week?
You know what, though? I was listening. I forget where I heard this at, but they were talking about this. They were like, why would somebody with, say, with a rooting interest in Alabama, why in the world would they ever give Auburn any credit? So it's going to be the human element really adds some intrigue to this because we're going to know what they emphasize first off, and then we're going to start to see, okay, are there any maybe not even unintentional biases going on? It's going to be really something. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that say that the football playoff will solve everything, but I think when we get to the final rankings, you're going to see a bunch of arguments break out, which will be great because that just makes it good for the sport. But
that's one of the other fun things about college is you get these debates. You never get this debate in the NFL because you can prove it on the field.
Right, exactly.
So this will be fun. But we move on. Number 8 was Michigan State. They had a bye in preparation of their huge Big Ten clash this week in East Lansing. We'll talk about that in a minute. Kansas State, they get another win. They're 7-1 with a 48-14 win over Oklahoma State. Kansas State will probably just move up the one spot with Ole Miss.
Yeah, but you know what? Should we start taking a closer look at these Kansas State Wildcats? Because they played Auburn real tough at home. They lost, but they did play them tough. Mm-hmm. They beat the daylights out of a pretty good Oklahoma State team. I mean, they're putting together a nice, quiet little resume here.
They are. But see, and the other thing with the Big 12 is much like I just said with the NFL, that's something that will play itself out because every team plays each other.
Right.
You're not going to be skipping anybody. So let's see what Kansas State's schedule is. I know they still have to play Oklahoma. No, they beat Oklahoma.
Right.
Oh,
boy.
We're going to talk about. Okay, save it. We're going to talk about it in a minute. Huge game in the Big 12 next week.
Yes, sir. We've got ourselves another elimination game coming up here.
Oh my. Oh my. Yes, we do. We'll move on to number 10 was Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's going to keep doing what they're doing with all these tight wins over Navy of all teams in Annapolis with a 49-39 win over the Midshipmen.
That's the thing with this Notre Dame team. I just can't. They're just not this good. A good, dominant college football team should have no trouble with the Navy Midshipmen, and Notre Dame had to fight them every step of the way to get this win. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just, I'm sorry, but again, Navy runs that crazy triple option offense that I love so much. And if you don't face that a lot, that's going to be tough. But Notre Dame doesn't have that excuse. They face it 3 times a year because they play all the service academies. They all run that offense, so they've got no excuse. They're just not a good team. They're okay, but they're not number 10 good. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, you're right. Hold on, sorry,
But they're overranked. I think I'm not saying that they're horrible or anything of that, but if things keep playing the way they are, they're going to end up in the playoff. And boy, if they end up making this playoff, they're going to be the one team that probably doesn't deserve to be there.
Yeah, very true. They're fine. They're a good football team. They're not terrible, but they're not.
They're not. Yeah, I mean they're winning their games, but come on.
Yeah, they're not up there. But I think Notre Dame might just get out of our hair next week also. But we'll talk about that one when it gets there as well.
We have another elimination game coming up.
Mm-hmm. That next week is a big week when it comes to the playoff picture. But we can knock another team out of it. I don't think they were ever really in it. But the Georgia Bulldogs drop out with a 38-20 loss in Jacksonville at the world's biggest cocktail party against the Florida Gators. And, okay, Florida, Georgia, it's cute that you guys did the same colored jerseys or, both wore your home jerseys. You can't do that. That's not your thing, guys. That's USC, UCLA sort of stuff.
Yeah.
When you have an orange helmet and a red helmet, it doesn't work against each other. It looked awful. But Florida knocking off Georgia. How about that?
Well, the Gators, who were pretty bad, I mean, they're above 500 now. They, a couple wins away from bowl eligibility. They might be able to salvage a halfway decent season out of what looked like it was going to be a disaster for them. But this will make their season down there. I mean, this is the one that they'll, if they can get by with this win, because they're not a good team. So this takes some of the sting out of a bad season for the Gator fans.
And if you believe ESPN's playoff commercials, where they include every team under the sun in the, it's on or we're in campaign, it's all going to come down to the Georgia game, according to the Florida Gator fans.
Well, okay, maybe next year.
Yeah, well, it's also that commercial's so dumb. I keep meaning to talk about it because in that commercial they have like Temple fans, other team fans. Like, if we just, we're in it, we have a chance. Like, no, you don't.
You really don't.
Even the Duke guys like writing Duke into the playoff brackets. Like, no.
Well,
Duke would have to go undefeated to make the playoff.
Well, not really. I mean, if you think about it, if they stay with one loss and they beat Florida State in the ACC championship game, they could make an argument. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that Temple has no chance of ever seeing any of this playoff stuff.
Well, hey, we'll get to Temple in a minute.
But Duke actually does have a puncher's chance of I mean, now granted, it's going to be one of the stranger things we'll ever see happen in college football, but it's not entirely unrealistic for our Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah. We'll move on. And my favorite result of the week, Greg. Arizona came in at number 12. Arizona goes out of number 12 as they go into the Rose Bowl. And UCLA and their LA Steel He's knock off the Wildcats 17-7.
Yeah, two teams that were even at where they're standing there, still both way overranked.
Yeah, Arizona will politely just drop out of the rank, or out of the high end of the rankings, and
either that or they'll move up to number 6. I don't know.
No, they'll probably be back in the 20s. Where UCLA currently is.
Right.
I don't know.
I will say this.
The only relevant game they have left in their schedule is the ASU game.
Our predictions in the NFL were pretty much a disaster, but we've been pretty much on the money with college football so far this season.
We've got our pulse of the college football beat.
We really did, because we called UCLA not being as good as they had them way back in week 1, and we're right.
Yep.
And same with Arizona, but all right.
Baylor was number 13, and they get a 60-40 win over Kansas, because Kansas is bad and Baylor scores a lot of football points.
Yeah.
Nebraska. Well, hold on. Who was number 14? Number 14, of course. How could I skip them? My Arizona State Sun Devils. A tight game against a very tough Utah team in Tempe. Goes into overtime, and the Sun Devils come out with the field goal in the first overtime for the 19-16 win. A win over a ranked team,
yeah.
And they were 14. Based on some of the movement up front, maybe ASU flirts with the top 10 this week.
I can see it.
Ahead of a huge game in terms of playoff implications and Arizona State's season in general coming up next week when they host the Notre Dame Fighting Irish down in Tempe.
Another elimination game.
Another elimination game. And Arizona State, I'm sorry ahead of time, everybody. We're going to be wearing the Desert Fuel gray copper jerseys.
Oh, boy.
I'm sorry. The helmet is nice. Just look at the helmet. Just stare strictly at the helmet.
I think the sad thing about all these crazy college football uniforms is I'm starting to get used to them. They don't bother me like they used to. It's just like whatever. But, that's a good win. I mean, Utah is a good team. They're a tough team, and that's a nice win for the Sun Devils. I think you're right. Because you're going to have – let's see what the rankings were or going into this week. We had
Arizona State, they moved up to number 11 in the AP poll. If that's any kind of indication, because Arizona State was also, I think they were 15 in the AP last week, so they move up to number 11 with the win.
But you looking at the playoff rankings. Okay, you've had Ole Miss lost, so they're not going to obviously move ahead of Ole Miss. But you had Ole Miss lost, you had Georgia lose, and you had where's the other?
Notre Dame struggled.
Georgia lost, so there's some room for them to move up.
Yeah,
I could see
Arizona lost.
Yeah,
I think they'll. It's very possible to move up because again they beat a ranked team,
right?
And so we don't know. The first rankings come out, we kind of try to see. Well, yeah, they have this many games against ranked teams, but now that the first rankings are out, now you've had teams play other ranked teams. You see how much the ranked team wins mean to the committee going into the next week.
I can see the Sun Devils cranking the top 10 this week. I think that's going to happen. Actually,
I don't know if they break the top 10. I think if they break the top 10, it's going to be at 10.
Yeah.
But I think 10, 11, right around there, with a game against a similarly ranked Notre Dame next week, it'll be fun. And one of many fun football games we'll have next week. But right behind ASU at 14 was number 15, Nebraska. And they summarily beat Purdue, as a lot of people have.
Yeah, they've really posted. I mean, look at this. Look at the wins they've hung on their resume so far this year. This Nebraska team.
Stupid.
Florida Atlantic, McNeese State, Fresno State, who we thought was going to be tough. Turns out they weren't. Miami, not so tough. Illinois is horrible. They lost to Michigan State, beat Northwestern, Rutgers, and Purdue.
Yeah, no, their signature win is a 3-point loss to Michigan State.
Exactly, yeah.
Why are they 15?
I don't know.
They're 8-1 greats. They're 8-1 in the bad side of the Big 12 or Big 10.
Right, yeah. Well, here's the thing that's even more ridiculous. Now, I get Ohio State's still paying the penance for that loss of Virginia Tech, but no one is going to tell me that the Nebraska Cornhuskers are better than the Ohio State Buckeyes. I rarely will do the homer route to defend my team, but in this case, I'm right. The Buckeyes are a better team than Nebraska, and this is nonsense. So,
speaking of your Buckeyes, 55-14 rolling over Illinois. Ohio State comes into the committee rankings at 16. Probably right.
Yeah.
Probably right. And, maybe they move up a little bit just because of the movement up in front of them. But
if they had done this to Penn State last week, if they'd put two of these in a row together, they might have had a chance to make a little more movement. But that Penn State game hurt them a lot last week.
Yeah. And they have the thing that's interesting is despite how big this upcoming game against Michigan State is this week for the Big Ten, it also is if Ohio State wins, Ohio State's probably going to screw the Big Ten out of any playoff chances at all.
Probably.
If Ohio State were to manage to pull out the victory. But who knows?
Well, it's still a long way to go, but it's another. We've got another elimination game coming up on Saturday. Not that they're one of these teams. Either Michigan State or Ohio State is going to be completely out of the playoff hunt. Any shot at all, however unrealistic it might be, it's gone for one of these two guys after Saturday.
Yep. Number 17 was Utah, and they lost to ASU, as we said. Number 18, Oklahoma. They beat Iowa State. Cool.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Nice job, Oklahoma.
LSU was 19 and did not play. West Virginia was 20 and lost. Clemson was 21, did not play. UCLA was 22 and beat Arizona. Number 23 was the East Carolina Pirates.
Oh, East Carolina.
They'd been a good team all year. They were one of our favorites of the non-power conferences. And the thing is, with the way that the bowl system works, they still have to pick. I think they still have to pick the highest ranked non-power conference team. Right. And East Carolina was that team. They were the team that was going to break through. But now that East Carolina they lost to Temple. In Temple.
Yeah.
First win over a ranked team for the Owls since 1998.
That's a very bad loss for East Carolina.
Yeah, that'll drop them right out of the rankings. And I don't know if they have to have a ranked team or if it's just who they decide is the best of the non-power schools. But maybe if Marshall stays undefeated, maybe Marshall works its way somehow into the top 25 and gets a what would be a quote unquote BCS buster type spot.
I think Marshall's in the driver's seat for that now. Actually, Temple's 5-3, so it's not that big. But
it's still Temple.
5-3 Temple team. That's not like losing to a 5-3 Arkansas team. That's a big difference there.
Yeah. But too bad for the East Carolina Pirates. Maybe there's still a lot to sort out there, and I'm still not very sure on some of those rules. Those will get sorted out later. It's not worth really thinking about because it's kind of inconsequential now.
Right.
Our Duke Blue Devils, they had a rough day of it in Pittsburgh, but they come out with a double overtime win over Pitt, 51-48, and stay 7-1.
Yeah, they're still right in the thick of it in the ACC.
They're on a collision course with Florida State.
That's right. That's right.
And Louisville, as we mentioned, they were 25. They lost to Florida State. They will probably drop out of the rankings just as quick as they were in them. Let's look ahead to next week, though. And,
we got some big stuff coming up. We teased
a little bit of it, and man, oh man, this is a week in college football. It's Thursday, Clemson, Wake Forest. No big deal, whatever. Out of the way. Don't need to talk about it anymore. Saturday. Oh, of course, this is the big game of the day, Greg. Is Mississippi State UT Martin. Bulldogs better look out. They might lose to, they can't overlook the Tennessee Martin.
Okay, who are they playing the following week? Because this is clearly some sort of scrimmage. Let's see here.
Who are they playing the week after?
Alabama.
And
it's a scrimmage. Yeah, it's a scrimmage game to get ready for Alabama.
Yeah, that's
when you see an SEC team playing a UT Martin this late in the season, you know they've got a huge opponent coming up the following week.
Yeah, so look out for that. Florida State hosts Virginia. Virginia has a decent defense. Maybe they give them a little fit, but a game that would have been a lot more important earlier in the year, but Auburn, Texas A&M. Still could be. I mean, the Aggies maybe put up points, but didn't their quarterback
got
Kenny
suspended,
Hill,
I think, or something?
Did he get suspended? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
So probably not the upset alert that it could have been. Ole Miss, they were gearing up for a for a game against somebody as they host Presbyterian.
Oh my God!
Yeah, they were getting ready for Arkansas.
Really?
I guess I don't know.
Let's see here. That's interesting because okay. Well,
no, they play Presbyterian and then they have a bye week and then they play Arkansas.
Oh, all right. Well.
2 weeks off.
In Ole Miss's defense, it might just be one of those things where they had a slot on the schedule, and that's who could fill it, and that's just who they had to go with. But
But here, let's get into some of the meats of this schedule. As number 5 Oregon goes to Utah.
That's going to be a fun game. I think the Utes are fully capable of knocking off the Ducks. I really do.
Yeah, and Utah's number 17. They did lose, so they'll probably go down a little bit in the rankings. I don't see them dropping out of the top 25. They're just a solid team. But that is a dangerous place to play for anybody.
Yes.
Especially if you're a team that's got national championship hopes, as Oregon does right now.
Yeah, this
can't
could
overlook Utah.
This could be an elimination game for Oregon because Utah, they're tough, and they can beat Oregon. I don't know if they will, but they're certainly capable of it.
Mm-hmm. Number 6 Alabama goes to number 19 LSU. And LSU's been up and down, but they've knocked off some teams, and they've lost to some teams pretty big. We'll see how they match up against the Crimson Tide in Death Valley.
Well, again, that's a real tough place to play. Death Valley on a Saturday night, and it's Alabama. They're going to be fired up. So that's another one. We could see a real seismic size shift in things after this weekend.
Yeah, as we continue on with Kansas State, number 9, taking on number 7 TCU, the only top 10 matchup of the week, and probably the eliminator game for the Big 12.
Yep.
Winner of this game, driver's seat in the Big 12, and Kansas State has to play Baylor the last game of the year, and I think TCU. I don't know if TCU has any ranked games after this one. No, if TCU can beat Kansas State, they finish up with Kansas, Texas, Iowa State.
That's a pretty easy schedule.
Right, whereas Kansas State, they still have to go to West Virginia and to Baylor. So they got the tougher part of their schedule here at the end, and they host Kansas in between that.
Yeah, see, now here's the thing. Okay, Kansas State, let's say that they knock off TCU, knock off West Virginia, Kansas they should have no problem with. And they beat Baylor. You know, like I said earlier.
That's a playoff resume.
Yeah, you've got to start taking a real serious look at them at that point.
6-point loss to Auburn, win over at the time number 11 Oklahoma, win over TCU at TCU. Well, it'd be beyond that. It'd be road wins at Oklahoma, at TCU, at West Virginia, at Baylor.
Yeah.
If they can win through that gauntlet, they're a playoff team.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tall order to fill, especially when you got to do all that on the road. But again, they're putting it, like I said, quietly putting together a pretty good resume here.
Yep. And all purple matchup, not something you see very often.
Yeah.
But supposedly, if I saw the thing right, I don't know if TCU is going to be wearing all white, or maybe that was last week.
That was last week.
That was last week.
And it looked really good too. I got to say, it looked really sharp.
TCU's. When they updated their uniforms, they looked really good.
Yeah, they did a nice job on that.
The other seismic eliminator game, if you will, in the Big Ten, your Ohio State Buckeyes go to East Lansing to take on the number 8 Michigan State Spartans. What do you think, Greg?
Any slim playoff hopes that the Big Ten had right on this game? If Michigan State wins, then they're probably going to move up some, and that might solidify them. They still got, but I think they're both in the same division now, so they won't meet each other for the Big Ten title. But Ohio State, to have even the slightest Hail Mary chance of trying to get into this thing, they have to win this game. This is a huge game for the Big Ten because what little hope they have rides on this one. So
right, and that's the thing that I think too is if Ohio State wins this game, even if they go on and win the Big Ten. But see, then they probably play a ranked Nebraska in the
right. There a lot of things would have to happen.
I want to think with the way that things are laid out, if Ohio State wins this game, it eliminates the Big Ten from the playoff.
If everything goes according to plan, it probably does. Because
but if Michigan State wins, they're still on the fringes of a wild card berth.
Yep. It's
wild card berth. That's not what that is.
Well, it kind of is, really.
kind of, sort of, but I don't know. It's weird.
That fourth spot's basically a wild card berth, yeah, because you're going to be fighting with, you're going to have the three clear cut. The first 3 choices are going to be pretty clear cut. That fourth one's where the argument's going to be taking place.
Yep. Just beyond that, currently number 10 Notre Dame goes to currently number 14 Arizona State. Those rankings will probably get a little bit closer this afternoon, but a big game down in Tempe between the Fighting Irish and the Sun Devils.
That's another elimination game. One of these teams will have no hope after this.
One of them will have no hope. and one of them will have a lot of hope.
Yeah,
like potential. This is one of those games that could vault you right back into the thick of that actual playoff talk. Whereas the other one, you fall right back out of it.
Well, you look at the SEC schedule this week. I mean, you've got an LSU-Alabama game. LSU is certainly capable of knocking off Alabama. You've got Utah playing Oregon.
UConn can beat Oregon.
Right.
Kansas State, TCU.
Right.
If chaos ensues, one of these teams is probably in the top 5.
Exactly. If everything else, this is going to be an incredible weekend because it's going to just change the entire landscape when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm. Georgia, Kentucky, a big game in the SEC East. Not necessarily a big game in the country anymore. Colorado, Arizona, same thing.
Yeah.
Arizona, ugh. But Baylor, Oklahoma. Now, this is a big game for Baylor because if Baylor can win out, because they still have to play Oklahoma and Kansas State, if Baylor can win out, maybe Baylor can sneak in the back door too.
Right. You'd have to start taking a look at their resume.
Yep.
But again, this is a game where I think Oklahoma is capable. This is going to be a game
because
where
the thing to remember is Baylor did beat TCU.
Right, and
one loss was to West Virginia.
Get out the basketball scoreboard for this one.
Break out the abacus.
I don't know what the over/under is. I've got to think the over/under has got to be at least 80 points on this game.
I don't know. Currently, Oklahoma's a favorite though in Norman, 5.5 point favorite.
Interesting.
Let's see. West Virginia takes on Texas. UCLA goes to Washington. Our Duke Blue Devils host go to Syracuse in a big game as we prepare for March Madness. I mean,
that's a potential Final Four matchup, right?
It's a potential Final Four matchup, yeah. Which one of these teams will get a number 2 seed in the region?
It's going to be a good, And then you got Louisville and Boston College.
Yeah, that's not going to be a ranked. That's not going to be on the ranked schedule in a few hours.
Right. But a big, huge weekend coming up in college football this weekend. There's going to be next week's show is going to be very interesting because we're going to be talking about an entirely different look on everything. I think.
Mm-hmm. We got Notre Dame, Arizona State. You got Oregon, Utah, Alabama, LSU, Kansas State, TCU, Ohio State, Michigan State, Baylor, Oklahoma.
There's going to be that. I just for the life of me can't figure out why. And I used to be against the college football playoff up until the past few years, but I can't for the life of me figure out why no one thought of doing this before. I mean, they thought of it. Why did it take so long to get to this point? Because this is awesome.
And the thing was always funny was everyone always said, well, then the regular season games will mean less.
Oh my God, they mean 10 times more. Yeah, they're way more meaningful.
As far as
now.
I can tell. Every one of these games is so much more important than it would have been a year ago.
Yeah.
It's like the games would have been big. All these games would have been big. Yeah, okay. Ohio State versus Michigan State. Whoever wins goes on to the Big Ten championship game. And, maybe whoever and onto the Rose Bowl. Well, now it's not only just, maybe you win the Big Ten. It's are you impressive enough to make it into the playoff?
Exactly.
And same with all these teams. All these teams in the past – there was only maybe talk of maybe 4 teams that were going to be eligible for the national championship game at the end of the year. And as the games went on, then you say, okay, well, this team's 1 and this team's 2. You add more teams to the mix, and now you have more teams with a shot. That means that more of these games mean something. And as long as we don't overinflate it and give too many spots, if we stay at 4 for a while, then maybe we go to 6 for a little bit. And then at the most, if we stop at 8, then I think 8 is perfect for this.
But you know what this does, though? There's a lot of people, one of the big arguments is a 16-team tournament.
No.
That takes all of this out of the pic because then when you're looking at the top 16 spots, then the regular season games become meaningless because a 2-loss team's going to get in no matter what.
Right, 2-loss team, and then a 2-loss team could end up getting hot and winning the national championship, and that would just devalue the whole thing. I mean, honestly, if you want to get the way it's going to be the most exciting is to keep it exactly how it is, 4 teams, because then everything is meaningful. I can see them moving it up to 6 and giving the top 2 a bye.
Right.
The thing.
But if you want the drama, if you want to keep everything the way it was before the playoff, 4 is your best number. I mean, I think 8 would be fantastic, probably a little more fair. But if you want to keep the drama and keep it where every week is just huge like this weekend's going to be, you got to keep it at 4.
Yep.
It's going to be an incredible weekend, though. This is why, if given the choice, I would take college football over the NFL. Simple as that. This is a perfect example of it.
It's going to be a huge week. And you know what? We might just have to lead with college football next week.
I'm thinking we probably will. Yeah, probably will.
Probably will. But that's it for this week in NFL and college football. I don't think we missed anything. Anything huge?
No.
No?
I will just say, okay, just real quick, just to we've got Maction going on ESPN now. We're finally at the point
we
of the
do?
season. Yes. Tuesday night, we've got Bowling Green and someone, and Toledo and someone else. 2 MAC games on tonight on ESPN, yeah.
I'm excited. I'm going to be working, but it's going to be on my TV.
I'm hoping I can get home in time to catch my Rockets in action on television tonight, so I'm real excited about that.
Yeah, some hot action.
Absolutely.
Can't wait. This is my favorite time of the year. Football every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Well, and like I said, man, the college football season, we've got roughly 4 to 5 weeks left, and that's it.
Yeah, because we're going into week 11.
Yep.
Week 16, of course, is just the championship games,
right?
And Army Navy. But yeah, we're
in the thick of it now.
We're getting close. This is the good times. This is the important stretch of college football when you finally get into the real sets of fall and it starts to get cold and the hits get a little bit harder and it's the best. It really is. Yep, and we've got some elimination games. We're going to have a much different looking poll coming up next week. It's going to be something. Yep, it's going to be something. Any last words, Greg? Go Rockets tonight. Go Rockets. Go Bucks on Saturday. Yep. Go Packers. Let's just take those Bears to school on Sunday night and have some fun with that. And Aaron Rodgers, get me a bunch of points for my fantasy team. Jordy Nelson, too. Eddie Lacy. Randall Cobb. Let's see. Go Sun Devils. Beat Notre Dame, please. Do it. Yes, please. National championship implications here, guys. You know, it's not often you get to put Arizona State in national title contention. Just doing it for no other reason, just to get Notre Dame the hell out of this picture because they don't belong in it in the first place. That, and I mean, could you imagine if ASU beats Notre Dame, and then ASU beats Arizona, and then you have Oregon and Arizona State in the Pac-12 title game, and oh, God, that'd be fun. Yeah. That'd be fun. Potential national championship spot on the line, ugh. Go Colts, beat the hell out of the bye week, make it your bid. And this week is the final week in California high school regular season football, and I get to cover my alma mater, Laguna Hills, for the first time. Cool. Probably going to get their asses kicked, but it'll be nice to go meet my old coaches and be like, hey, look, I'm doing things now. My alma mater in high school, now we don't cover them because I work in a different town, but they are historically bad. They're like the Chicago Cubs of high school football. Yeah. 1 state championship in their entire existence. I think 5 winning seasons in my entire lifetime. Ooh. Are undefeated this year and headed straight for the playoffs. The Norwalk Truckers, which I still think is one of the greatest names in all of high school football, the Truckers. That's just so cool. Yeah, the Laguna Hills Hawks. We're one of the smaller schools in the area, so our good seasons kind of fluctuate with whatever talent you get in because that's the way public schools work here. Right. Especially when all the really good kids go to, the Catholic private schools like Mater Dei or Santa Margarita, or they just happen to move to Mission Viejo and join the Mission Viejo football team. They have a farm program, and that's why they went. That's why they went, because they wanted to go milk cows on campus. Right. Sure, they did. Mm-hmm. And why is that kid also, 6'3" and 250 pounds? Right. Anyway, but that'll be fun. And it's fall. It's November. November football, some of the best. Yep. For Greg, I'm Zach. This is basically a football show. Follow us on all the platforms. Follow us on Twitter. Follow the Basically a Podcast Network. And we'll be coming at you with more sweet podcast honey for your eardrums. We'll catch you all next week. Enjoy the football.